Hello and welcome to the Jackcast, the Swansea City podcast. I am Guto, and with me, as always, we have Steve Carroll and Matt Barocco. Evening, boys.
Evening.
We've also, as it's the Derby Day weekend, we've got a special guest with us tonight, and it is a very special guest because for your listening delight, we have former professional footballer, journalist at The Athletic, the absolutely brilliant authority on all things Swansea, that is Stuart James. How are you, Stu?
Well, I was all right until that intro. That's made me feel a bit anxious now. A lot to live up to. I'm very well, thank you, and thanks for having me on. I'm really looking forward to this, fellas.
Oh, we're really chuffed to have you on. And it's a brilliant week to have you on because, of course, like I said, we're looking forward to the South Wales Derby and that chance to complete a historic double over our oldest rivals. But before we get to the Derby chat, and we'll also finish off by discussing Wales's exploits at the end of the pod too. Before that, we thought it would be a good chance, seeing as we've got Stu on the podcast, to look back at all things Swansea this season and how the season has gone. Before we do that, Stu, just for those who don't know, how did you get so closely involved with the Swans? Because obviously you write a lot with about this, but I think it's fair to say that by now you are also a fanatical fan. I think that's fair to say.
Yeah, that is a fair description for sure. Yeah, far too fanatical, actually. I don't know how I've got emotionally involved with this crazy football club like I have. But anyway, it goes back really to covering the club for the Guardian and the Observer, and really enjoying that period when Swansea first came into the Premier League. And from a media point of view, the access was amazing. It was just really refreshing dealing with a club at that level who I'm sure the players didn't see this as refreshing, but were using their local fitness health club to do change basically before they went training, obviously, where you'd sort of walk in there and you'd see Michael Laudrup having a latte next to someone who'd just come out of the gym, kind of thing. It was all a bit surreal, and you do your interviews in that environment with the players, and it was just a breath of fresh air from what I'd been used to. Everyone seemed really kind of humble. I think a lot of the players had been on that journey with the club through the league, so really, really enjoyable covering Swansea during that time. Didn't really think anything more of it, and then my son got into football around the age of 3 or 4. I think on the back of the 2014 World Cup, he'd got really kind of engaged with that. And yeah, we just had a free Saturday afternoon, and I was thinking, what shall I do? I'd quite like to take him to a game somewhere. And I found Swansea a really friendly club to deal with. Jonathan Wiltshire, the former head of media, was always amazing and really welcoming there. So I basically took Zach to Swansea one afternoon. I think it was 2015 this now. Yeah, I know it was a 0-0 draw with Everton. I can remember Kevin Morales was sent off, I think, late on. It was a pretty poor game, actually, which doesn't explain why Zach fell in love with Swansea that day. But he did, and he wanted to keep going back. And so I used to do that sporadically through that season and a bit of the next one, I think. And then it got to the point where I thought, do you know what, I should just get a couple of season tickets. And I didn't really think that through because obviously I was covering the club and in the press box at that time, and I needed someone to sit with Zach. So it was the opening day of the season, the dreadful season when we went down. Sorry, not the opening day. I think it was the first home game, which was Man United. Does that sound right?
Yeah, that's it.
I think we lost 4-0. And anyway, I told my dad's 84 now, so he must have been, 78, 79 then. I said, I've got a couple of tickets for you to sit with Zach at Swansea against Man U. Do you fancy coming down? And I had to twist his arm a little bit. And it wasn't until literally we got outside the ground that I handed in the tickets. And obviously it said season ticket on there. And he kind of just looked at me and said, am I doing this every week? And I said, no, Daddy, it'll be fine. We'll find some other people to do that too. But he did sit with my son an awful lot that season because I was in the press box. Occasionally I'd have a week off and would sit with Zach. I remember doing that for that Liverpool game. God knows how we won that when Alfie Mawson scored, I think. So, yeah, I just found myself getting more and more immersed in the club, I guess, through Zach, really. And strangely, and I know this will sound odd to people, I've been quite emotionally detached from football for a long time before that. I'd reported on it. I'd played, not at a high level. I was released from Swindon. after a 2 years apprentice, 1 year pro, and then played for Bath City for 5 years, semi-professional, Newport County for a couple of years. And once I started reporting, I didn't feel any emotional connection with the club. My dad had taken me to Forest a lot in the 80s when I was younger. But yeah, I just was sort of drifting along with football really, and just concentrating on it from a work point of view. So to suddenly be emotionally involved in it was quite strange really. And I often think, I'm in games like when I'm doing that ridiculous stuff that time's running out and the fourth official puts 4 minutes up and I'm setting my stopwatch so that I can monitor every second. I'm thinking, what on earth has become of me? I've fallen in love with the club, and absolutely it's really thrilled going to games. It's not all about the matches, which is probably a good thing. It's about meeting up with Steve, having a chat, other people I've got to know, the season ticket holders around us, and just really nice connection with the club. It's obviously a long trip, 160-mile round trip all the time with Zach, but they're brilliant days out, and never regretted getting involved at all. Wish we'd seen a bit more success. Wish we'd enjoyed those brilliant years that you boys had. When Swansea were doing well in the Premier League, those European nights. But still, really love going now. So that's my story really.
Has your son forgiven you yet?
Do you know what? It's so strange because when we go anywhere, obviously we don't, we're Bristolians, we don't have the Welsh accent, and that's the first thing people say to Zach, who's normally got a Swansea top on somewhere, and stuff. So, well, you're not Welsh. Why do you support Swansea? And then I have to try and kind of go through that story, which I don't know. I think Zach he quite enjoys being different as well. Most of the kids around here support Bristol City. The club had a real drive a few years ago to sort of tap into that young support, and actually they've done that really well. So you don't see what I remember growing up with, which is in the 80s, loads of kids walking around with Liverpool shirts on and that kind of thing. He is the odd one out, but he loves going there, and his life revolves around that football club really.
That's brilliant to hear. Absolutely fantastic. Let's just get down to it then. This season has been a bit of a crazy one at the Swans. Well, it's always crazy with the Swans, as you know. But what have you made of this season so far? Because, of course, Russell Martin came in very, very late in the summer. And I think we all accepted there was going to be a season of transformation, and that may have its ups and downs. How's it been from your point of view?
Yeah, all of that really. I mean, I remember standing with Steve behind the goal at Blackburn on the opening day, thinking, crikey, this is going to take some time. I think we knew that anyway, but that confirmed it that day. In fact, when you look back at the team that day and where people were playing, and actually so much has changed even since then, which is bizarre to think really when we're only talking, 8-9 months ago, something like that. But it was always going to be so difficult because of the circumstances. The circumstances do annoy me. I think it was crazy that it ran on as long as it did with Steve Cooper when, deep down we all knew he was going to go. But that was obviously really disruptive. You do wonder what difference it would have made if Russell Martin could have come in 6 weeks earlier. I think we could see in that Blackburn performance on the opening day what he was trying to do, but how he was doing it, racing against the clock, and that showed. It felt like the second goal I recall when unfortunately Bender seems to think made a mistake. That had looked like happening a few times, and that's not a reflection on him. They just hadn't had a chance to work on the training ground as you'd like to when you're having a real shift in philosophy, which it was. We were going to a different style of play, a really strongly possession-based style. And then to answer your question about how it's been enjoyable at times. It's been frustrating on other occasions too. I have this feeling of wanting to sort of press fast forward really, and skip through the season and get to the start of next season, even though we all would like to think really positive things will happen in the summer, but none of us can be sure that will happen. And I can't see us spending much money. So the club's going to have to be really clever in how it recruits the players that probably we all think we need. It's been weird on other levels too, because I look back, my favourite week of the season was, and it's probably a lot of Swansea fans, I'd imagine, when we beat Cardiff, and then we followed that up beating West Brom. And I love the Cardiff game for obvious reasons, but actually I enjoyed the West Brom one every bit as much, and maybe even more. And I know that will sound strange to some people, but I think we were all buzzing still from Cardiff, and then did we not concede within a minute or something that night against West Brom?
Yep.
And I remember thinking, oh bloody hell, here we go. But actually, we played really well that night, especially second half, and we got absolutely what we deserved. And Patterson's goal to win the game, was a fantastic moment. I'm jumping around like an idiot, just like I had done for the Cardiff game a few days earlier. And I think I just got swept along with it a bit then and thought, yeah, we're really going somewhere. Yeah. And I then came the reality check of actually, no, it's not just going to all fall into place. And then there were some difficult performances after that, some frustrating ones. Reading at home drove me bonkers. I just couldn't believe what I was kind of seeing that day. So, yeah, it's been hard, and sometimes you feel, where are we going with this? On other occasions, like Huddersfield away in the second half, you think, wow, yeah, I see this now. This is really taking shape. And then there seems to be another step back again. So perhaps it's exactly what it looked like it would be at Blackburn on the opening day, and what we should have all really anticipated. It's going to take Russell Martin time. I should say I do think he was a really good appointment, and I really like him as a guy. I think he's totally immersed in Swansea as a city, as a football club. I think he's really bought into it in that way. But I think we can all see that there needs to be, an influx of players again in the summer if we're going to make this style of play work. And yeah, if I go back to the most recent game I saw, Birmingham away, I came away, I can't lie, quite frustrated that day. I wanted to see us pass the ball with a lot more conviction and purpose, and I thought we were very fortunate to get a point that day.
Yeah, I don't think many people would disagree with you there, Steve. Do you agree with what Stu said? Is that a fair reflection of how you see the season so far as well?
But yeah, definitely. I mean, it has been very inconsistent, hasn't it? Really. I mean, you wouldn't really want to bet on the Swans, I would say. I mean, there's been a few occasions where we've been pleasantly surprised, and there's been a few where it's gone the other way. I think the slow start was predicted by all of us, really, wasn't it? With the Stuart outlined, really, with the lack of pre-season for a new manager, and obviously then the change in philosophy, and then a few players came and went as well. So yeah, I think the frustrating thing really is I don't think we've progressed as much as I probably would have liked. So that is a frustration, and we'll certainly be looking for that, I think, over the last few games to take some momentum really into next season. But I don't think there's been some poor performances, haven't there? And I think at times we're still questioning what our best team is, and just some of the mistakes we're making. It just feels like we're not learning from them at times. So there is some frustration there, I would say, but we've just got to remain patient, and I think it's difficult. There isn't a bottomless pit there of money, so whatever happens in the summer, we're going to have to be shrewd with our spending.
Matt, I think we've seen some growing frustration probably since Christmas in particular, that this kind of feeling that things aren't moving on a bit, and there have even been one or two kind of Martin out grumbles, and a few people kind of saying that they're losing faith in the manager. I mean, where do you stand on this? Because as Stuart said, we had kind of a rapid improvement at the start of the season to the point where I like Stuart, got a little bit carried away, I think, that week that we beat Cardiff and West Brom, and then the away at Coventry was fantastic as well. But we've had a slump since then, and I think it sort of plateaued in the last few months, and we've had a few good performances, more bad performances, but a lot of middling performances as well. And it's just been difficult to build any kind of momentum over the last few months. Do you think this is where, at the start of the season, would you have expected this to be the case under Russell Martin, or do you think it has actually failed to meet initial expectations?
I would say we're not far off where I thought we'd be in terms of league position and points on the board. I think we've probably just done it a little bit backwards, really. I expected the slow start, but I expected it to slowly see the building blocks of the philosophy come into place and the shape to look there. And something's coming about here now. and you start to see these things growing over time, and then almost, I mean, a nightmare for going back to the Potter season on this podcast, but in that Potter season, we grew. Obviously, that was a team that hadn't really played much football for 3 years either, and a lot of youngsters came into that team, and we grew through the season. And then towards the end of the season, I thought we were really building something now, and I think everyone had kind of like bought into it and thought, yeah, next season is going to be a really good season for Swansea City. Of course, he leaves in the summer, but this season for us, we did peak around the November time or October time, and have most of our good performances within the 3 or 4 week period, which was great at the time, and it did lead us all up that path of thinking, God, what are we going to be like in April if we're like this now? And of course, since then, there's been a lot of grumbles, but I don't think they're unjust. I do think to an extent where we're at is perhaps where we should be at, but what we're not seeing as much of, which I'd like to see more of, is those building blocks. Are those examples of what we're doing in the week in training? The statistic about the lack of set piece goals, which thankfully that duck's off our back now. But in terms of where we are growing, making the same mistakes every week and stuff like that, defensively, shape looking all over the place. And you're thinking, right, okay, that was a bad performance. Defensively, we looked all over the shop, and then to see it again a few days later or a week later, leaves a few fans scratching their heads. So the season has been a weird one, and I think there's a lot of weight being put on this season being a transitional season, and I really do hope that is the case, and next season is a completely different story, because I want to see us learn and look to see, right, okay, clearly this is what we've been working on. And that's really where any confusion and disappointments come from my end, is not always seeing the training ground work, or what is supposed to have been happening on the training ground transpire on a match day, which frustrates everyone. It probably frustrates Russell Martin more than most, to be honest.
Interesting you mentioned Potter there, Matt, because I was doing a bit of digging before this pod, and interestingly, at the exact same point in Potter's season in charge, we had a point less than we do now after 37 games, which shocked me, I'll be honest, because I remember that Potter season as probably a smoother one in terms of kind of consistent progression, perhaps, than I remember this one. I think this one's been a lot more kind of stop-start than Potter's was, even though obviously he had plenty of difficulties to put up with, and not least that crazy January transfer window. But I don't know, I was a bit surprised, because I remember the mood towards the manager and towards kind of what the manager and the players were doing back then being probably more positive than the mood is currently around the Russell Martin project and this current season. Would you agree with that?
All I will say as a caveat to that is my recollection of that season is we were better and played better than 90% of the teams we come up against. That wasn't always the case, but a lot of the time we were undone by extreme naivety, which is something that's happened this season as well, but a lot of it is to do with defensive shape, which I think is a training ground thing, and awful refereeing decisions. Just so unlucky and unfortunate sometimes that we would batter teams and somehow contrive to lose. In fact, the complete opposite of what we experienced under Steve Cooper, where I just thought under Potter we would dominate games, but not just dominate it by passing it around and having 600, 700 passes with 2 shots on goal. This would be a game where you'd have, especially in the second half of the season, where you'd have Dan James running the show. You'd have Ollie McBurney, who would spend more time in midfield than up front because he was such a workhorse. And the whole team, Bersan Salina that season was an absolute genius. But we had so much fluidity in our play, so much movement. So it was exciting to watch. And it was really, you enjoyed looking forward to the Swans games thinking, win or lose here, we're going to play some lovely football. And we were really unlucky in a lot of our games, which can perhaps explain some of the reasons why the point total is so close. But again, going back to it, it was really exciting. And I think one of my gripes about this season is, if I'm being honest, it really hasn't been that entertaining at all.
Mm-hmm. I mean, Stu, Matt spoke a little bit earlier there about the building blocks. Are you seeing building blocks? Are you seeing things that Russell Martin is putting in place right now, which, even though this season's not really going to result in much, we're going to finish roughly mid-table, lower mid-table probably. Are you seeing things being put in place now that you feel will lead to kind of better things next season?
I think I am at times, but not always. I go back, I mentioned that Huddersfield second half, and I thought we were outstanding that day. And then that's the frustration. You think, well, why can't we do that on a more regular basis? I agree with, it's interesting when you think of the Potter one. And look, I'm Johnny come lately to Swansea. I'm very conscious of that. But for me, those last few years in the Premier League, that survival football, I think everyone had become really tired of that. So I think when you think back to Potter's season, I also see it in the context of thinking, actually, this is a breath of fresh air. There's a few kids in the team. There's some new faces. We're back to playing, what we like to call the Swansea way. And I guess with the situation now, there's the context of, okay, it's now the fourth season out of the Premier League, and maybe people's patience isn't quite the same as it would have been a few years ago. It's so difficult to gauge because obviously we've had COVID as well. And the bizarre thing with the whole Steve Cooper situation is that, fundamentally we're gauging the mood from social media more than anything else, because Cooper bizarrely had, very few games in charge with fans. He had more, obviously, without supporters in the stadium. And we can all say what we think it might have been like at times last season, but we can't be sure. I mean, I think you could see those building blocks really clearly with Potter. And I remember hearing when Brighton were coming in, I was devastated by that, because I was thinking, I'm so intrigued to see what Graham's going to do in his second season in charge. And who knows what he would have done. Obviously, DJ had gone, and Ollie was going to be gone anyway, and Ollie the same. So we can't be sure. But there was certainly during that second half of the season. It's interesting the stat you mentioned, because it doesn't feel like that to me. But obviously the figures are the figures. I recall going along to games in that second half of the season and feeling really excited about what I was going to watch, and thinking I had a clear idea of what I was going to see as well in terms of the way he wanted to play. And there was just that buzz around the place. McBurney was terrific up front. DJ, whenever he got the ball, you just thought something was going to happen. We don't seem to have those same players now. I mean, I'll be honest, when I turned up for the Birmingham game the other day, and 10 minutes before kickoff, they said that Patterson was out of the team, I was like, oh, God. And should I really feel that downbeat that one player's not going to be out there? But suddenly I was thinking, well, that's all our creativity gone. And that might sound over the top to some, but it does feel like that so much hangs on him. You look at the Peterborough game just before, and he sets up one goal. Another goal is what we call a second assist now, where it should have gone in the first time, and then I think Perot puts it in after. But he's just so central to the way we play, or the way we play when we play well. And so, yeah, I felt quite demoralised by that. And actually, as it happens, I was right to feel like that in a way, because I just felt we really struggled against Birmingham. The concern is also, and I don't want to sound a negative tone, but the ease with which teams seem to play through us at times. I mean, Birmingham that day seemed to get in again and again, and it just feels like on the transition, when we lose the ball, we're very, very open. So I think, you have to, it's no good saying when he's appointed we need to be patient and then 9 months later being fed up with it. I think we have to give him time. Would we have liked to have seen it further forward? Yes. Perhaps the comparisons that we make with Potter aren't always helpful. It's different players. But I think come the start of next season, Russell Martin's going to need to start the season well. And we can't use that word transitional anymore then. And if he's going to start the season well, I feel he's going to have to be supported in terms of the players that he wants to bring in the summer, because I still feel that squad at the minute is a long way off what it needs to be to play this brand of football that he wants to play and be successful with it. The little glimpses like at Huddersfield make you think, oh yeah, it can happen, but it's just not happened nearly often enough. And I look at the players at the back and I think he needs some pace back there. He needs players who are more comfortable on the ball back there. I think we need another creative player in midfield, someone who's box to box probably, who can get goals, who can set up goals, not just depend on Patterson. And then you've got the wing backs area as well. Obviously, we don't know what Ogbetta's going to be like. It's too soon to judge him yet. I thought Christie's done really, really well. He'd had a difficult afternoon against Birmingham. That's as poor as he's been. But if we look at his whole time at the club, he's been excellent. And actually, I think he's carried more of a goal threat than Ethan Laird did. So, there's positives to take from that. But yeah, in terms of those building blocks, I guess you see them at times, but you don't see them often enough. And just finally on that set piece one, I've only ever left 2 Swansea games early. It's like an absolute no-no for Zach and I, even with the long journey and it being sometimes in the Premier League losing heavily. But one was the playoff final when Danda had that shot in the 90th minute that went into the crowd, and I thought I've seen enough now and just had enough. And the other game was Fulham, ironically, when it went 3-0 down and was a school night, and I'm thinking, we're down to 10 men, this is going nowhere. And we got outside the ground and then just heard the announcement that Joe Burrow has scored, kind of thing. And ironic, looked at my phone and I said, not only that, Zach, we've scored from a corner as well, kind of thing. And he went to turn on his heel to go back in. He said, we might get something out of this. I said, no, we won't. And another 100 yards later, it was 4-1. So anyway, there we go. It's difficult to analyse. I don't know how coherent that is, but yeah, it's been what we thought it would be, a transitional season, and we'd all like to see a little bit more. Let's hope we can finish the season strongly. And you guys know better than me, if we get a result at Cardiff on Saturday, if we go and win there, then probably everything will be seen in a far more positive light, not just because of one game.
And that has beautifully brought us on to the Derby match. Let's discuss it. It is, well, it's the biggest game in any kind of in any season. Our trip down the M4 to the Cardiff City Stadium to face our old friends in blue. And we're chasing, Steve, a historic double. Not the first time we've been trying to complete this elusive double, but we've never quite managed to do it. Is this going to be the year that we finally get 2 league wins in the single season against Cardiff City?
I'd be lying if I said I was overly confident going into this. Our form has not been great, has it? And history suggests that it's not going to happen as well. So, yeah, my confidence isn't sky high. Although you do never know. It is one game at the end of the day. You've got to think the law of averages suggests that at some point somebody is going to do the double. So, look, if it's going to depend on, isn't it? Stuart was talking about Patterson there. He was injured for the last game. And Downs didn't play the last game because I think he was carrying a knock potentially. I mean, if those two, for example, don't play, then my confidence will drain even further. So that's going to be the big thing. Who is fit? Who's going to be playing for us? And if we've got our full team out there, we will have obviously a significant better chance. So look, it's a one-off. We just got to go there, and hopefully the players know the importance of the game, and obviously they should be there thinking to themselves, well, if someone gets the winner, then they'll go down in folklore forever, won't they? As the person who scored the winning goal to give us that elusive double that, as you know, both teams have never managed to get. So, you know, there should be a lot of incentive for the players come Saturday lunchtime, well, Saturday afternoon, I should say, because obviously for once it hasn't been moved, is it?
I still can't believe it's at 3:00 on a Saturday. That just beggars belief, really. But I mean, in fairness, the Swans, the one thing you'll say about the Swans is that they've proven time and time again that the players do know what this fixture means. They do consistently raise their game. And we've seen it several times before where they've gone into games on poor runs of form and they've just plucked a performance out of somewhere and just beaten Cardiff out of nowhere, really. And we're hoping, really, aren't we, that the same thing's going to happen again, because Cardiff have won 3 and drawn 1 of their last 4 games going into this one. We've only won 1 of our 4 games going into it, and that was a bit of a hairy one away at Peterborough as well. So the recent form would suggest that Cardiff are the favourites. They've also sorted out the home form under Steve Morrison. They've only, I think, lost one of their last 8 home games, and that was against Fulham. So let's face it, the odds are in Cardiff's favour, aren't they, Steve?
Yeah, I think the odds are, as you say, I think it's 7 wins in 12 as well. So they have picked up considerably. Obviously, they were on a shocking run, weren't they, earlier in the season, having lost 9 in a row, which at any level is horrendous, really, isn't it? So obviously great from our point of view, but yeah, they've picked up. It almost seems like a couple of the signings they made seem to have had an impact as well in the transfer window. Obviously, Tommy Doyle was one. I think Jordan Uche Ikpeazu was it? I'm not exactly sure how to say that one, but obviously I know they sold Kiefer Moore, but he didn't have a massive impact this season, really, did he? So if anything, they made a mistake, maybe not cashing in on him during the summer where they would have had more money for him. But yeah, it does seem like those couple of signings have helped Cardiff out, and they were in danger of relegation at one point, but they've got no such worries really now, have they? So they're probably in a similar way of us, looking to maybe finish in a good way and building for next season. But obviously on Saturday, nobody will be thinking about that. It'll be all about those bragging rights that mean so much.
Stu, we started talking there about the changes that have been since we last played against Cardiff, and this Cardiff team is going to be very different to the one that Mick McCarthy brought down to the banks of the River Tower back in when was it, October. I mean, it's got a bit of speed in it now. It's a younger team. They've used the January transfer window well. Cody Drama is a player that Steve didn't mention there, who I think, in addition to the ones he named, has added just a different dimension to what was a really sluggish side, I felt, earlier on in the season. How do you rate the job that Steve Morrison's done at Cardiff? Because I'll be honest, I didn't really expect much from him. I didn't think he'd last this long. I thought he'd be just a caretaker option, but his success means that he's kept the job. How's it struck you, his time in charge?
Yeah, exactly what you've just said, really. I agree with all of that. When they initially gave him, I just thought it was going to be a stopgap appointment, basically, that would see them through. I mean, they've done some strange things with managers. There never seems to be any real common thread running through their appointments. There's no real strategy there at times, but you have to say this has worked out really well for them, and he seems to have galvanised that Cardiff team. He's obviously very motivated. It's a chance for him to coach at a high level sooner than you might otherwise get. And yeah, they just feel like a very different Cardiff team to the one that came to Swansea in October, which was woeful, really. I mean, I couldn't imagine that I'd feel so comfortable sat there in the second half. I remember even 2-0, it was a lovely goal to make it 2. And sometimes, 2-0, you're often thinking, oh, God, we need another. And of course, I wanted us to get another, but I didn't feel we did need another that day. I thought Cardiff was so poor, miles off it. But it feels like, a completely different Cardiff side that we're coming up against on Saturday. A really difficult game. I said to Steve the other day that, a 1-1 draw would be a pretty good result, really. Would I take that now? No, absolutely not, because there's that obviously chance to create history, isn't there? You'd roll the dice. You hope we can go there and do that. And maybe this international break's actually come at a good little time for us. I don't think it's so much about chance for Russell Martin to do more work on the training ground, that kind of thing. I'm sure they've had a lot of messages over the course of the season, but I just feel it's not a bad time for us to take a step back. As we've touched on, we've been inconsistent with our performances, and I think the players will be bang up for this game. I've always sensed that whoever's in charge, that they've had a really good handle on what this game means to the city, to the supporters. So I just think it's key there, stating the obvious, but we go there and make a good start, not a Blackpool type start, which unfortunately, those conceding those early goals, and we don't find it easy to score anyway. That's the last thing we need on Saturday to give them any initiative, any confidence. But yeah, they're clearly a much better team, and their results show that. I did think at one time, crikey, they could get sucked into a relegation battle here. But they're well clear of that now. And just looking at the table, I think they're 2 points behind us, aren't they? So, the last thing we need is them beating us and going above us on Saturday. So, yeah, hopefully that little break's done us good. Patterson's back in the team. Downs is back in. Unfortunately, Manning can't play, which is a shame because I think he gives some balance to the team on the left. But otherwise, hopefully, we're at full strength.
I've got to ask you, as a reporter who will interview managers as part of the job, what do you think of Steve Morrison's kind of approach in post-match interviews? Because
Isaac Davis was the one, wasn't it? That was remarkable.
I mean, it's not just the one occasion. I mean, there have been several occasions where seems to have thrown youngsters under the bus. I mean, It seems to work, but it's so weird for me. I really can't get my head around it.
No, I don't. And does it work? I don't know. You never know what people think privately, do you? What they say publicly and what they actually think. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, I think he said something like he was more of a hindrance to the team, didn't he? When he brought him on and then took him off again. And I just found that an absolutely bizarre thing to come out with. You question whether someone would say that about a senior player, and saying it about a young player who's just finding his way in the game was really, really strange for me. And I know people say, oh, Morrison knows him, he's worked with him and all the rest. I just think, no, it's nonsense for me. It's completely different for you to say something like that about a young player when he's come into the first team, and a really talented young player by the sound of things. So, yeah, I find that strange. I think once you stray down that path of sort of criticising players, it can be dangerous. Equally, if we're all honest, lads, we want managers to come out and be honest, don't we? We don't. I think the last thing you want to hear is a manager saying we played well when you've just sat through it and thought, well, no, we haven't, kind of thing. But if you take that to digging out individuals, I think it's. I just don't think it's very clever. And it's strange that maybe he's learning and finding his way, and obviously dealing with the media in a way that he hasn't done before. But I'd be surprised if he keeps doing that kind of thing.
There's a way to do it, I always think. Like, if there's a young player maybe hasn't played very well, I'd always turn it the other way and go, like, I brought him off because he wasn't having his best day, but he's a young player. We'll have other days, there'll be more opportunities, that type of thing. You don't say the type of things that Morrison says, do you? Or not in my opinion, anyway.
Because for me, the thing is, he's had several games where he's started a youngster and then taken him off quite early on in the game. It happened with Isaac Davis. I think it happened with what's his name, Max Waters as well. I think it's happened with another player, and each time he's come out and said something similar, like, "Oh no, it wasn't. He wasn't good enough," or etc. And you're thinking, well, if you're having to do that game after game after game, surely the issue is with your team selection more than the player itself. I don't know. That's just me. But like I said, the results suggest that for the time being, at least, he's getting them to click. So who am I to judge, I guess? But I don't know. It's the kind of thing that I think fans will turn on and use against him if results don't go well. That's how I feel. I mean, Matt, looking ahead to Saturday, Stu's already put his cards on the table. He says he wants a win. He's not settling for a draw. My attitude is always safety first. I'm a Swansea fan living in Cardiff. I just don't want them to have any kind of bragging rights, and as long as we don't lose, I'm pretty satisfied. Winning is just a massive bonus. What's your feeling about this? Considering Cardiff's form, would you take and our form too? Would you take the draw, or do you think we've just got to go all out for the win and get that double that we've been chasing for so many years?
I think it's. I think right now the sensible thing to say was a draw would not be a bad result at all. I'll be honest about that. But obviously, once I get up there, once I've had a couple of drinks, once the whistle goes, I'll be thinking this is must win at all costs. But I mean, realistically, a draw's not bad. I mean, if you said to me every year we're going to have 4 points off Cardiff, and I'm not going to turn that down, I'll be honest with you. But it's just difficult, isn't it? Because obviously we do want that double, and someone may well do it at some point. And obviously, with the chance it is there, isn't it? It's the way that we've been playing. I just can't be overly optimistic that this is the time where we're going to get the double. I mean, I think last season was a big chance, really. I think if you win the away one first, that always sets you up nicely. And obviously, we we were the better side last year overall, and compared to them, obviously we finished fourth, and I don't know where they finished, but that did feel like a big chance to do the double. I remember I felt the year that actually we were both in the Premier League, that was a big chance, because I felt that we were a better side than them by quite a bit at that point as well, and obviously we ended up losing the first game. So, look, you don't know, do you? But I think if this was a normal game, we'd all be saying, "No, a draw's not a bad result here." But obviously it's them, and there's a double at stake, so it's a difficult one. But I think there's always that thing in the back of your head of thinking this could be the one chance that we get to do it. But I do also remember the times where we've been up there, particularly when Michael Chopra scored in the last minute, and it was hell on earth. So. Yeah, that's the problem, isn't it? It's a fine balance. It sort of depends on how the game is going. What I would say is absolutely do not risk everything to get the win, because if it goes the other way, it is horrendous.
Yeah, we all remember Michael Chopra's last-minute winner. That was not nice in any way, shape, or form. But still, those wins for Cardiff have been pretty rare in the last 2 years. They've only won one of the last 6. We've won 4 of our last 6 in the derby. And Cardiff have only scored 1 goal in those 6 games. How much do you think that those previous memories will actually hang over that Cardiff squad? And do you think that kind of thing will play on their mind, the fact that they do have quite a poor record and they have failed to turn up to several derbies by now?
Yeah, I'm never sure that going back in time, players think that much about that kind of thing unless they were one of those players who played in a lot of those matches. But I do feel there'll be a lot of talk in the lead up about the possibility of Swansea doing the double for the first time, just like there was last season. And I think that brings a psychological pressure for the Cardiff players to deal with, to think we don't want to be that group who suffered, the 2 defeats in the season to Swansea. We don't want to go down as being the team that kind of let the club down, so to speak. So they've got to deal with that side of things. It's funny listening to you guys. It makes me think, when you say about, not taking a draw or words to that effect, a draw would be the sensible thing. And I'm thinking I haven't got a proper handle on this at all, have I? Saying roll the dice and go for a win. But I think because I'm not Welsh, it's slightly different for me. And don't get me wrong, my son, Zach, will do the swim away with the best of them kind of thing. But I feel like Bristol City, I was desperate to beat them, desperate, and so was Zach. It's the city we live in, so it's a bit like you with Cardiff in a way, Guto. It's a strange relationship with us because we're obviously English and not Welsh, and that Bristol City game, I was devastated. I missed that start of the season. Ashton Gate, it looked like a wild night as well, brilliant night to be in the away end. We've been there a few times in, I think only come away with a 0-0 draw at best. So delighted when we won the recent one 3-1. Yeah, we love the beating Cardiff in October as well. But I don't have that same. I'm like, God, just go for it. Like Steve said, then it's not worth risking it. And I'm thinking, yeah, it is. Put it all on red kind of thing. Let's go for it and try and do the double. But Steve's told me many times of how horrendous it is travelling away from that stadium if you haven't got a result. And actually, when I did it with you, Steve. The 0-0 draw under Cooper in the first season. That is, isn't it? Is that right? Yeah. I remember getting on the bus afterwards, and it was just quiet on there. And obviously we hadn't lost. It was 0-0, wasn't it? It was a bit of a nothing game, really. But it was just a really strange feeling coming away from the game that day. In a way, it felt like a little bit of an anticlimax that day, and certainly felt very flat on that journey back to Swansea. And by the way, what a bonkers thing it was I had to do that day, where I went from Bristol to your house, stayed overnight, Steve, past Cardiff to Swansea, to go to Cardiff, to go back to Swansea afterwards, to go past Cardiff, to get home to Bristol. And, absolutely ridiculous. But I did want to experience the whole bubble side of things. One thing's for sure, if I'm watching Saturday, well, I will be watching Saturday in some way, shape or form, and I see, and obviously be cheering Swansea on, I'll be gutted that I'm not there to witness that little moment of history. But I do think that chance to create history is something for Swansea to play on in terms of the pressure that puts on Steve Morrison and his players.
For what it's worth, Stu, listening to what Guto and Steve were saying there, I'm actually leaning more towards your view on it.
Okay.
I think plenty of people feel like you two, to be honest. I think I'm just a little bit more overcautious. But I think, honestly, a lot of people are just like, right, shove it, go for the chance. If we
go for it. What I would perhaps say is, obviously you have to manage the game depending on how that game pans out. But if we're 70th minute and it's 0-0, it's really like, I'd be really infuriated if we played out a draw. I'd want us to roll the dice. It might not come off, but I wouldn't want us to play protecting a 0-0 or protecting a 1-1. I'd want us to at least try and grab the winner. And I like that Russell Martin seemed quite as astounded that it never happened in the history of the club. So I think it was a shock to him to find out, and I'm hoping that resonates in that he might see the way this season has panned out. Perhaps it hasn't really gone to the way he hoped it would have either. And he's looking at this thinking, wow, what an opportunity for me as well to really win over the doubters and stuff, and to really make me think, right, I've bought myself a lot more time now to get this working. If you do that, if you do the first double in history, that'll certainly help go a long way towards that. But yeah, play the game, but also if it's 0-0 and you've got 15 minutes left, bring another attacker on. Go on. It's never happened. It's never happened.
With that in mind, Matt, what would you like to see Russell Martin do team selection wise to give us the best possible chance of getting that double that we've been chasing for so long?
So there's players we've got that need to start. Downs and Patterson, fitness pending, are both nailed on to start for me. I want to see Olivier and Chama on the bench because I don't think he starts games very well. He hasn't got enough of a tank on him.
I think he's also been out with Cameroon in the World Cup qualifiers, hasn't he? Even though I don't think he's in the matchday squad. So I think he's been travelling very long distances during this international window, which isn't really the best thing for somebody with his kind of fitness and injury record.
No, and to be honest, they might play in our hands a little bit so that he's forced to start. I think he's really effective off the bench, actually. It's not like he comes on, let's use him as a bit part player. I think he is a really effective option off the bench. He's probably the biggest threat we've got on the bench if you think of the players that we tend to bring off the bench in a game. He comes on and he tends to make things happen. And in the times he's come off the bench, he's quite often been involved in game-changing moments. So it's a real great asset to have. He doesn't seem to have the same impact on the starting 11. Patterson and Downs in there, and obviously alongside Grimes. I don't think he's going to, play Ugbeta, but it would be a big ask, I think, for him to come and make his make a big impact on a game like that. But I would stick with the two up top as well, Obafemi and Perot, or whatever you like to think that shape is, up front. I think they are. Obafemi's in the form of his life, albeit it's an early career for him yet. But and Perot the same in terms of his season. He's still managing to chip in with goals. You need to have goal scorers on a pitch. We've been bemoaning the lack of chances created and really goal changing moments in games. When you do create them, you want players on the pitch that are going to stick them away. So Patterson creating for those two is always giving us a chance. The strongest 11, obviously you go with that, and you have players that can come off the bench and make an impact. It'd be interesting to see. Who wants to make a name for themselves, because there is a few players as well that maybe feel like they haven't had as much of an opportunity this season as they would have liked, and so they could try and make a name for themselves. It depends what Russell Martin is feeling. I think this game might still be up for it with 10 minutes left to go, and I'm nervous saying it, but I think it's going to be touch and go, and it's whoever's braver at that point, really.
Get a quick one. Who plays left side centre half on Saturday?
Well, if you're going with, Norton and Cabango are nailed on to be centre halves. But
Agreed. Who's the other one?
Probably play Bennett. I think.
Or Bird.
But it's between those two, surely. I I really don't want to see Flynn Downs dropped into defence.
No.
I think he's wasted in that position.
Yeah, that might happen if I'm honest.
I hate to see that happen. I think we just waste one of the best defensive midfielders in the championship if we did that. I would rather see Burns. I think just because of his mobility. I think this is mind you, Cardiff have got if they play Ikpeazu up front, then you need a big guy up against him to be able to deal with him. Maybe Bennett would be the guy in that case. That's a tough choice. I don't think there's a right answer there. I just think there may be a less wrong answer there somewhere.
Downs is the wrong answer, isn't it?
Downs is the wrong answer.
Do you know what? I think we mentioned this in the last podcast of the Birmingham game, Guto, with the compilation that Sky put together of the missed chances. The first one that Birmingham missed was a bloke that got in behind Burns, and he was running through treacle. He was losing ground on him.
That's true.
I'm not saying that he might have taken a knock. I'm not sure what the backstory was there. Of course, he was hooked at half time, wasn't he? But I think looking at it, I was surprised. I didn't notice it in the game much. I thought he held his own. But looking at the highlights and watching the game back, I was surprised at how slow he had been in a foot race. Don't know if that's the case on training ground and whether that's the norm for him, but I would probably edge towards Bennett on the count of experience, aerial threat, aerial ability at least at the back, and keeping that defence in order. Really, there's games in which you want to have a little bit of adventure at the back. And God, I'm just imagining Ryan Bennett playing those risky passes across the back line now, and my heart's in my mouth. But I just think this is the sort of game that he might excel in. He says nervously.
That's your worry, Matt, isn't it? That I'm picturing that scenario. I'm thinking, and Bennett, he hasn't played much lately, guys. No, it feels like he's been phased out the team a little bit, and I don't think any of us would ever see Bennett as being the sort of player that Martin would have brought in. He's obviously someone he inherited. And then I think Ben is improving all the time, but you wouldn't say that Ben's strongest asset is his technical ability to play out. He's got a lot better for sure, but it feels like we could really do with someone the other side. Obviously Norton in the middle, that role suits him. Although I still think without the ball, he gets dragged out of position a little bit. With the ball, he's such a calm head. But that feels like such an important position to fill in the summer, to have someone who is comfortable on the ball, who's got a little bit of pace, because we don't have that now. And as you guys talk, that's why I asked the question, because it's one that I can't decide on. I have no idea what to do. Part of me, I think Steve said you wouldn't want to see it, and I wouldn't be surprised if Downs does drop in there and he plays Smith maybe. I don't know. I don't think he'll play Burns. I can't see him playing him in a game of this magnitude, and especially after the Birmingham experience where he may well have had a knock as well. I don't know, but Latabodier, I'd be surprised if he put him in for a game like this, and because Bennett's been out the team, I don't know. I just don't know what sort of shape he'll be in coming back. It's a real, it's a crying shame that the Manning situation is what it is, really.
Exactly. That's what I was going to say. It's just that Ryan Manning red card is really costing us because it leaves the team really unbalanced when he's not playing both. I mean, he leaves two positions really, really problematic, really, left back and left centre back. It's just it's a really costly red card, that one.
And then we have 5 right-footed players across the back.
Yeah, it's a real issue, and it just once again leaves me very, very appreciative of Mark Gay and what an amazing player he was last season, because man, he compensated for a lot on that side of the defence. Really did. Well, let's finish off the Cardiff chat with a prediction, as we always do. Steve, we'll start off with you. What's the score going to be?
I'm going to sit on the fence and say 1-1.
Matt?
Yeah, I know Steve mentioned earlier in the podcast about, balance of probability and stuff, but in how many years, 100 plus years, it's not happened. So it just doesn't seem to fall that way. I'm going to say a 1-1 as well.
Stu? What are you feeling for this one?
Well, you got a hat trick there now, because I said this to Steve the other day, so nothing has happened to make me change my mind. So yeah, I think 1-1 as well. I want to say 1-0 Cabango header for some reason, but that's long overdue, by the way, centre half scoring like that. So, 1-1. That's my prediction.
I'm the pessimistic one because if I was looking at this objectively as a neutral, I think I would be going for a Cardiff City win. I think they've got the form on their side. I also think they're the kind of team that we do struggle against. They'll be reasonably comfortable sitting back, and they've got pace to catch us out on the counter attack when we do lose possession. I think those transitions could be key really to deciding whether or not we get anything out of the game. But I am worried about this one, I'll be honest. I hope that by predicting a defeat, a 2-1 defeat, I'm actually giving the Swans the kiss of life.
But, if you don't mind, Guto, just before we wrap up, I'd just like to ask Stu and Steve, who've both gone with 1-1 with myself, how they think that scoreline is going to come about, whether you think it's going to be us with the double in our sights or whether we're going to claw a point off it. Steve, go on.
I think we're probably more likely to score first. And then...
So we are going to have that moment, you think? That Joe Allen moment.
I remember the infamous chopper year, we were winning, weren't we?
Mm.
But the funny thing is, I think in those days, I'm not sure the double was built up in the way that it has been in recent years. I don't know why that is, but
I think there was more on the line back then because, well, maybe not compared to like the last few years, but back then both teams were going for promotion to the Premier League, and the big question back then was which team's going to be the first Welsh club to get to the Premier League. That was the bigger question than who's going to be the first to complete the double.
It's almost as though no one knew there hadn't been a double, and then someone stumbled across and went, "Oh, but that's keep going on about it all the time."
Genuinely, this is one of the questions I had in mind. Like, we'll just deal with it really quickly. How big is the double? We've been going on about it all season, but I thought about this last few days. I do think when either side does eventually do the double, and it will surely happen at some point in my lifetime, I do think I can't see it being the kind of thing that fans brag about for years to come. Like, oh, we were the first to do the double, have that, in the same way as when the Swans went up to the Premier League, that was kind of bragging rights for life then. We were forever and a day the first Welsh team in the Premier League. It doesn't feel quite as kind of...
I'm changing my Twitter handle if it happens, mate. I don't know. It's obviously a massive thing in this moment. I do think it does play a lot into what Steve was saying. There was bigger fish to fry back then as well. At the moment, the season boils down to Saturday, really, doesn't it? Which is the stark reality of it. But do you know what? To add to what you were saying, I got the feeling that as much as we're gonna, absolutely love if we manage to do it, I think the other team will do it next season. I just think it'll be one of those things that once the door's been opened, I just think next season we'll probably lose the double. I'll just be like, oh no, it's gone that quickly. But that'll be typical, wouldn't it?
One thing I will say is if the Swans do lose, the entire Jack Army can blame me for it, because I have been to every single South Wales derby that's been played at the Cardiff City Stadium, apart from the only two that we've won. So those are the only two that I have.
It needs to give you some laxatives on Saturday.
If you've got any friends with COVID, then pass them over to cough in my face. So there we go. Well, we just have to hope and pray, really, that the Swans do what they, in fairness, do on a very regular basis in this fixture and really turn up and give it their all for the fans. We all remember what that felt like back in October when we got the 3-0. We've experienced it plenty of times before. But if we could just make it on Saturday, again, another big victory in the derby, man, it would be just so sweet, so amazingly sweet. We're just going to wrap up the podcast by looking back at the Wales game, particularly. I don't think we need to concentrate too much on the Czech Republic friendly, but Steve, I know you were there on Thursday night against Austria. Where does that rank among the kind of the recent great games in Welsh international football?
It's definitely in there, isn't it? I think it's probably the best one, certainly, that I've been to since Euro 2016. I mean, you could sort of sense it was just the big one. I mean, I was in Cardiff quite early, and the pubs were bouncing. You couldn't really get a seat in a pub. Everywhere seemed to be singing. And I think a couple of my mates were on trains up after me, and they said there were people singing on the trains, and you don't usually get that, to be honest with the Wales game. So you could just sense it was a big one. And unfortunately I only got in there just in time for the anthem, so I missed David Owen. But
same with me. I was gutted.
I mean, it was a special night. You could just feel it was, one of those big game nights, and big players, big moments, big games. Gareth delivered again, didn't he? Thank God.
I mean, well, that's the thing, isn't it, Matt? I mean, Gareth Bale, we've run out of things to say about him, but it's so rare to see a world-class player who doesn't just bring his, do his best for his country, because in fairness, there are a lot of great players who've done their best for the country. Nobody could accuse Cristiano Ronaldo of ever slacking for Portugal. But Gareth Bale deliberately kind of saves his very best for Wales, and always has always put international football front and centre. I mean, that is just pretty unique in the modern game, isn't it?
Well, I love the fact that his career has some very noticeable similarities to Ryan Giggs, in that they're both the best left-sided player in Britain in their generation, and you were just thinking, wow, and they're both Welsh, and they're both being considered the best player in their Wales squad at any given time. And one of them chose to bin Wales off and concentrate on his club career, and the other one did the complete opposite. And I think the Welsh population took that on board quite early on, and took Gareth Bale to their heart. And his relationship with the Welsh fans has always been A+. It's been top notch. He's always had that big game mentality, and when you have a game like that, you want your best players in the pitch. You want your players with that sort of experience. I mean, this is a guy with 4 Champions Leagues. He's won 2 of them on his own. He's won a Copa del Rey, now countless La Ligas. He's just a guy who's done it all at the highest level. So when you got your other players, and Wales squad is littered with championship level players, some even below that level now, who have never experienced the magnitude of the fixture on Thursday night. Looking over the changing room and seeing Gareth Bale there, cool as a cucumber, talking about playing golf on the weekend. You just think, we're in safe hands here. This guy is, and I've been quite critical. Well, not critical, that's not a fair word. I think I questioned previously, is his influence perhaps waning now? Is his age just getting on? Maybe his legs aren't quite there. Well, he's proved me wrong on Thursday. He turned up in spades, and he did what he does best, and he's taking the game by the scruff of the neck. So fantastic. And I hear now he's making his club decision after the playoff final. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there for him next season.
I can't believe you missed the national anthem, you two. Crikey. I on here.
Anthem. It was free singing it was. I got in there for the anthem.
Okay. Well, I actually, my wife is not a football fan at all, and I had my mother-in-law here as well last Thursday, down for a few days, and I actually said everyone's got to stop for this, and I put it on, turned it up, and this is an Englishman, obviously. I used to love those moments covering Wales, listening to that. I remember the opening game at Euro 2016, as I'm sure you all do, which was just, an incredible moment hearing that go around the stadium. And I just think you've got a really special connection. You know this anyway, but you've got a really special connection between your football team and your supporters. And then if you contrast that with what happened at England, Wembley last night, with Maguire being booed, it's night and day, that difference. And I think Bale loves that. He feeds off that. Playing for his country has always meant so much to him. And you just see him pull on that red shirt and take his game to another level in a way. Now, some people certainly we know they don't like that in Madrid, but it just brings out the best in him. And I think it always feels as well as if he's playing with his mates, not just playing with international teammates, playing with his friends, plays with that freedom. And I understand what you're saying, Matt, really, when you think, was he on the wane? Could he still do it? Could he still bend games in Wales's favour as he's done over the years? Did he have that power, that ability to influence a game in the same way? And obviously, he did answer all those questions. That free kick was just extraordinary. And then actually the second goal, which is, I don't think many players score that, running with his back to goal almost, and just how instinctive he was, taking that shot, taking that touch first and then thumping it in. So yeah, I was delighted to see you boys get through. I did have Zach asked me some interesting questions, to be honest, next. He can't get his head round, Steve, how you can go to Cardiff to watch Wales play, and I was trying to explain all that, but that was quite complex for him to understand, which I guess
that out of it, haven't you?
Yeah, you have, and I tried to say that to him. Yeah,
we was discussing how someone views it as it's Wales' stadium, but Cardiff play there, and I suppose sometimes you
I like that.
think of it a little bit like that, really. But look, the truth is, it works. I mean, when I was a kid, we were filling the Millennium Stadium, which was great at the time, but the atmosphere really wasn't what it is at the Cardiff City Stadium. So that's sort of how I look at it. And I am one of those people who does strongly believe that that's where Wales should play. And I would be furious if they moved it to the Millennium to the point where I probably wouldn't go. That's how strongly I do feel on it. It really works. The atmosphere is something special, mainly because there's fans of other clubs there, not Cardiff, because as we will see on Saturday, Cardiff are not particularly loud. And we will be reminded of it again. But it just works. I don't know what it is, and the fans love it, the players love it, and yeah, it does anger me if it ever gets mentioned about moving from there, because we found something that properly works.
If you put a top 5 down, sorry, Stu, if you put a top 5 Cardiff City Stadium moments down, I'm not sure a Cardiff City game would get in there.
Yeah. Genuinely, it's just it doesn't feel like Cardiff Stadium when Wales are playing there. It did before. I mean, we have had this problem in the past where kind of fans have not been able to leave their club rivalries at the door, and we have there's nothing worse though when you've paid to watch your country play, and there's some waster who starts booing Ashley Williams when he plays, or picks a fight with the Swansea fan or something like that. Or there's this aggressive thing that some fans will do. They'll go up to you and ask, like, who do you support then? Who do you support? And you just know that, there is a potential wrong answer that you could give to that question, which could get you in trouble. So it's just, I think we've had so many kind of miserable experiences with that over the years. I think the message has finally, I'm hoping, got through to the majority that actually Wales games are better when you just forget about Swans in Cardiff for 90 minutes and just, put that to one side and concentrate on supporting your country. Because actually, the weird thing is, I was at the stadium on Thursday night, and I'll be there again on Saturday, and the two atmospheres will be so different, because the derby is all about hatred and animosity and bitterness. It's a horrible, spiteful game. It brings out the worst in both clubs, really. And Wales games are the total opposite. They're positive, they're celebratory, they're a chance to embrace everything that's great about Wales, rather than just hating on the opposition. So, I mean, you won't get two more different atmospheres in a single stadium than what you had at Wales-Austria and what you'll have at Cardiff versus Swansea. But they're both brilliant in their own special ways, but what both of them show kind of contrasting elements of football fandom, I guess. But I mean, yeah, I'll be honest, when I go to watch Wales play at the Cardiff City Stadium, I do by now, I think of it as kind of Wales' stadium, and Cardiff just play there the rest of the year. That's how I see it these days.
Yeah, it's great. Good stuff.
And just to finish off, Steve, looking ahead to that the World Cup playoff that awaits us in June or whenever it gets played, who would you rather play in that match, Ukraine or Scotland?
It's a tough one, really, isn't it? I mean, I'm fairly sure that it's going to be Scotland one way or the other. I think the heartless side of me would probably rather Ukraine. I mean, they've got such bigger fish to fry at the moment, haven't they? And hopefully that will get resolved in a good way. But I mean, we've just got to focus on ourselves from our point of view. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, if we've got everybody fit, it's a home game. We've got a very good record at the Cardiff City Stadium. It's there for us then to do the job. So that's all we can really focus on, isn't it? And of course, the draw's on Friday, so there'll be an incentive dangled in front of us. We'll know exactly who we could be playing. So, let's just hope everybody's fit, because if they are, then we've got to be confident that we can do the job.
Yeah, agreed. Well, that's a good way to finish off what's been an absolutely fantastic podcast. Thank you. A massive thank you to Stu for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on this massive week of the podcast, and hopefully we can get you on some other time as well. But thank you very much for all of you for listening. Hopefully you'll be able to join us again next week when we'll be looking back at the South Wales Derby and hopefully celebrating a Swans double. So without further ado, come on the Swans. And please, 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 please do it for that Travelling Jack Army. Until next time, thank you very much for listening.